Hello, my name is Kimberly Woolridge. I am the State ADA Coordinator and the Director of the ADA Compliance Division, which sits in the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We are here today to provide you with information regarding your voting rights. Did you know that your right to vote is a civil right? The history of voting rights in this country has evolved. In 1789, George Washington was elected as the first president of the United States, and at that time, only 6% of the population could vote. Only white men who owned land could vote. White men who did not own land could not vote. Women could not vote. Indigenous people could not vote. And people who immigrated from other countries could not vote. The right to vote has expanded over time. In 1963 and 1964, a large scale effort was started in the South to register Blacks to vote and remove barriers to people's right to vote. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed, and the right to vote was recognized as a civil right. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights is here to assist you if you believe that you've been discriminated against with regards to your right to vote. Now I welcome Executive Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, James E. White, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and the Attorney General Dana Nessel. Director White, would you like to begin the Q&A?
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important discussion. I'm James White, the Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. My role today here is simple. I'll be asking the questions. The tough part, the answers will be handled by our two esteemed guests, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Attorney General Dana Nessel. I'll be getting started with my first question. And the first question is regarding registering to vote. Now that the October 19th deadline has passed to register to vote online or via mail-in applications, can people still register to vote? And if so, what is that deadline?
Yes, people can still register to vote in the state of Michigan up to and on election day itself. However, because we're in the final stretch of this election cycle and the polls close at 8 p.m. on election day, in these last final days, you have to register in person at your local clerk's office with proof of residency. But importantly, you can decide at 4 p.m. on election day or even 7 p.m. on election day that you want to vote. You just need to bring your residency, proof of residency to your local clerk's office and register to vote, and you can get your ballot and return it all in one trip. We do want you to make a plan to vote. We don't want you to wait to the last minute, but know that we're going to do everything we can to proactively ensure that you can register to vote up until the polls close, which is your right at 8 p.m. on election day. You just have to do so at your local clerk's office, and you can get that location at michigan.gov/vote.
Right, thank you very much. Are there any limitations on registering to vote, such as criminal record, being on probation or parole, homelessness, that type of thing?
I guess I'll take this one. There really are not, with very few exceptions. So if you are a returning citizen, if you're a person who has a criminal record, whether that be misdemeanors, felonies, it does not matter what you have on your record or how many. It doesn't matter if you're on probation. It doesn't matter if you're on parole. You can still vote. And you don't have to do anything special to get your rights restored the way we've seen it in some other states. In Michigan, as long as you are 18 years old and you're a United States citizen, and you've lived in whatever area you're registering for 30 days, you can register to vote. And, just like everybody else, the only limitation at all would be if you are currently incarcerated and you are under sentence. Those are the only people that cannot vote due to some sort of criminal offense. Everybody else can. And I think it's very critical that we get the word out to everyone, because a lot of people think, well, I have a criminal record, so I'm not eligible. And nothing could be further from the truth. That is not the law in the state of Michigan. You are still a United States citizen. You still get to vote. And Jocelyn, do you want to address, I'm sorry, Secretary Benson, do you want to address, what you do in the event that you are homeless and you want to vote?
Yes, thank you, Dana, or Attorney General. And you can see we work together quite well, the AG and I. Persons experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity can still register to vote and vote. And you have the right to vote regardless of your housing stability or scenario. As long as you're a citizen in the state of Michigan over the age of 18, you can vote. So some recommended options for eligible voters without a permanent home address is you can list a shelter address as your voting address on your voter registration form. You can use a street corner or a park address on your voter registration form. You can list an address where you receive mail or where someone's able to receive mail on your behalf. Bring one of those or some sort of evidence of that residency or that connection to you to your local clerk's office, and you can register to vote and pick up your ballot and vote it right there. But it's important, and in fact, my office will be doing more education in partnership with shelters and other community organizations in the days ahead, as we have done already, to make sure that those facing housing insecurity right now know how to cast their vote and ensure their voices are heard.
All right, thank you. That's great information. I do want to go back to the criminal record. Thank you for that, Attorney General Nessel. But I just want to ask a question about returning citizens. Can returning citizens newly released from incarceration register to vote?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, all they have to do is register just like anybody else would register to vote. It doesn't matter. I mean, again, the only people who cannot vote are if you are currently incarcerated and you are under sentence. And I say that because theoretically, you could be in a county jail awaiting disposition of your case, not yet convicted of that, and you haven't made bail or bond. You could still vote under those circumstances, although clearly it's going to be more challenging for you to do so. But technically, you're eligible. So anybody at all, if you have served time or you've been on parole or probation, or you currently are on parole or probation, it doesn't matter. You should still just register to vote. And again, there's no process of having to get your rights restored as we see in other states. Or for instance, I know for folks who want to be able to legally carry a firearm, you have to be able to get your rights restored. Not true for voting. You just register to vote and that's it.
Fantastic. Okay. So here's the next question. If a college student is registered in the city or township where their college or university is located, but they're taking classes virtually, like so many of us are doing right now, from home in any other city or township, where should they be voting?
Well, I'm happy to take this one. I think the bottom line is if you're from Michigan and go to school here, you can register to vote at your school address or your home address. It's really your choice. But if you're from Michigan and go to school outside of the state, you can register to vote at your home address in Michigan. If you're not from Michigan, but you go to school in state, you can register to vote at your school address in Michigan. And if you have a Michigan driver's license or state ID card and you're registered to vote in Michigan, your voter registration address and the address on your state ID will be the same. So if you change the address on one, it will automatically change the address on the other. The Secretary of State's office has been consistently mailing stickers with new addresses to place on licenses or ID cards to make sure people know that synchronicity of the addresses. And we're also encouraging, in fact, the Attorney General and I just held a town hall with college students all across the state last night where we talked about this issue and emphasized that if folks with unique situations who want to vote in Michigan and have questions about how under quarantine or on their campus they can do so, send me an email at secretary@michigan.gov, and we've got staff ready to go to advise college students on their specific scenarios to make sure that we can help them make a plan to vote.
All right, thank you very much. So now I'm going to move into special circumstances for voters. What accommodations are there for persons with disabilities to vote?
Want to take this, Secretary Benson?
Yes, I'm happy to. Voters with print disabilities may apply for accessible electronic absent voter ballot that can be completed electronically, printed, and returned to the local clerk. But all voters, including voters with disabilities, also have access to a voter assist terminal at all polling places. So if you choose to vote on election day, you can do so at or in partnership with a voter assist terminal. That helps a voter mark a ballot. It will mark the ballot with the voter's choices, but does not tally the votes. Once the ballot is marked, it is then printed and counted in exactly the same fashion as all other ballots.
Okay, thank you. Is there a way for voters to see or read about the machine that they will use prior to going into their polling location?
Yes. Now, importantly, we have 3 different types of voting machines made by 3 different types of vendors, and each county chooses the type of machine they want all their residents to have. So voting systems do vary from county to county, and you can get information on which voting system is in place in your particular county and what that entails at michigan.gov/vote. And I want to encourage people to go to that website, michigan.gov/vote, for any of your voting needs, but particularly because there may be misinformation, and it's already circulating, around machines and their security and whether they're connected to the internet, which they're not. Voting machines in Michigan are not connected to the internet. But we want voters to know and feel assured of the sanctity of those voting machines, because we know so much attention has been on that in recent years. So michigan.gov/vote has an entire resource dedicated to and page dedicated to talking about the security of those machines as they relate to each voter in each county.
All right, thank you. That's very good information. Are there other accommodations persons with disabilities can receive at their polling location?
Yes, I'm happy to take this one, AG.
Most of these are going to be for the secretary because she's the expert on all of this stuff. I'll chime in when I think I can be of assistance.
Great.
Thank you.
Deal. So yes, I mean, there are a lot of accommodations, including the voter assist terminals that I mentioned earlier. Assistance from poll workers is available to read a ballot to them. Importantly, we've provided all poll workers with sneeze guards. So in the event that a voter needs to read lips, the poll workers are able to remove the mask that is in place for protection of health and safety, and still with a sneeze guard provide information to a voter who requires that assistance. And in addition to that, voters can request additional lighting. They can request a chair to sit down at while they complete their ballot. And they can also bring in someone to assist them as long as it's someone of the voter's choosing, to ensure that they have all the support they need to express their vote in the most clear way possible.
Right. Secretary Benson, I think this is yours as well.
Okay.
Are voters whose first language is not English provided with accommodations?
Yes. In many polling locations, voters can actually obtain ballots in other languages. This is something that ballots are produced at the local level, and many clerks have provided translated ballots in producing ballots in English. And that's been a very important accommodation for our citizens who speak English as a second language. That does depend, however, on the local clerk. Voters may also bring someone to assist them with translating the ballot for them. And we've also worked to recruit bilingual poll workers and have held many voter town halls with our staff in multiple languages, including Spanish and Arabic and other languages, to seek to ensure that voters of all backgrounds have equal access to information about how to vote this year.
Great. Let's move on to physical barriers. What should voters do if they encounter physical barriers to entering polling locations?
Well, if a voter feels in any way they are blocked or intimidated from voting or unable to vote, they should call the Voter Protection Hotline 866-RVOTE. We want to ensure that voters have a lifeline of support and know where to call so that we can know about any challenges. Now, in terms of physical barriers or the physical accessibility of polling places, my team has actually been visiting many polling locations, particularly in our largest jurisdictions like the city of Detroit, to assess their accessibility on Election Day in partnership with community representatives from community organizations, because we want to know what it's going to look like on the ground. Polling locations are selected by local clerks, and so it's by and large their responsibility to ensure physical access to the polls. And so while we're doing everything we can to prepare and ensure at the front end polling places are accessible, we again want to encourage voters to call 866-R-VOTE on election day if you do encounter a barrier or any challenges at the polls, so that we who are in direct connection with them, with the folks staffing that hotline, can immediately respond and make any adjustments necessary at the last minute.
All right, thank you very much. And I would also add, as we transition to reporting issues, any voter that needs to file a complaint can file a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights as well by going to www.michigan.gov/Michigan Department of Civil Rights MDCR. So as we transition to reporting issues, what should a voter do if their right to vote is challenged at the polls?
Well, let me say this. Firstly, my office obviously is working very, very closely with the Secretary of State and her department. And our goal is that, voting be a joyful experience for everyone, whether you decide to vote absentee or whether you decide that it's important to you to vote in person on November 3rd. We want this to be an experience where it is threat-free, harassment-free, intimidation-free. And the biggest thing for you to be concerned about on November 3rd is who you're going to vote for. That's what you should be focused on, and honestly, nothing else. So what we're doing is we have, coordinated with law enforcement all around the state to make sure that under any set of circumstances, if a person, and understanding, of course, that voter intimidation is a felony in Michigan. So anything that you do, either directly or indirectly, to improperly influence a person's vote or to deter a person from exercising their right to vote is a felony offense. And the Secretary and I take this incredibly seriously, and we have and will prosecute in the event that we see this. And we think it's important that people understand that we believe that voting is a fundamental right. We know that voting is a fundamental right in accordance with every court decision that has ever been rendered. And so we are not going to allow anyone to interfere with a person's right to vote. So we've coordinated with law enforcement all around the state. And once we're made aware of any sort of intimidation tactics at all, or anything that a person believes to be threatening to them, we are prepared to have somebody act right away. And while we think it's important that we don't have law enforcement at the polls unnecessarily, because a lot of people, that's intimidating to them in and of itself. So we're not going to just have law enforcement sitting there at the polls, but they'll be on guard and they'll be nearby in the event there's an issue, so that they can get to the polls right away if there is any kind of issue of any sort. And so, of course, and the Secretary can talk more about this, but she's issued very specific guidance to the 1,600 clerks all around the state in terms of what is permitted and what is not permitted. And that is her authority as the Chief Elections Officer of the state of Michigan to make that determination. And anyone who has any issues, of course, once they were contacted, either at our office or local law enforcement, or the information that the Secretary will provide, we will be on it immediately to ensure safety and security at the polls. So we just want to send the message that, for some people, obviously it's great that we have no reason absentee voting in Michigan. And so if you have any concerns at all, you should vote today. But you shouldn't have any concerns, because we're on it and we've worked diligently to make sure that this will not be a concern for people, and that any bad actors are immediately removed from the polls and held accountable.
Thank you. What is a provisional ballot?
I can take that one. A provisional ballot is a ballot that is voted at the polls or voted by a voter when there's some uncertainty as to whether or not they're able to cast that ballot. And the uncertainty can be based on a number of things, and it's meant to ensure that we capture that vote at that time before the polls close at 8 p.m. on election day. And then we have some time, actually several days even after the polls close under the law, to work out whatever inconsistency it might be that would lead to questions about whether that ballot should be counted. And then ultimately the goal is to minimize the number of provisional ballots that are offered to voters, because you want everyone vote to regular ballot at the polls or absentee. But in the case when there is provisional ballot, to do everything we can to verify that voter, verify that vote, and ensure that if it needs to be counted, it is. Some examples is, if someone shows up to the polling place and they're not registered, they can, of course, go to their clerk's office, register and get their ballot there. That's the first thing we'd advise. But if they choose not to do that, they'd be given a provisional ballot. And then that gives us some time to confirm maybe they are registered, maybe there's some glitch in the system that doesn't have them show up or whatever, or they can somehow have some time to prove their registration. That's an example of that. But again, we want to minimize provisional ballots, and the best way in that scenario to react, and what we advise poll workers to do, is to let voters know they can go to their clerk's office and register right there and get their ballot as a way of addressing that. So provisional ballots are a fail-safe. They're meant to sort of use in limited circumstances to ensure that we're working with the voter to make to ensure every voice is heard.
All right, thank you. In keeping with that question, I want to expand on it just a little bit more. What should a voter do if they are made to cast a provisional ballot?
Well, you should work. Yeah, you'll get instructions at the time. First, the thing to know is that the purpose of the provisional ballot is to capture your vote, and then ensure we have some additional time after the polls close to work with you to confirm your eligibility and get it counted. So, if you show up to the polls and you're not registered, which is the most frequent time people get a provisional ballot, we do want voters to go right to their local clerk's office, register before 8 p.m. and get a ballot at that point, and then return it and vote it. That's your best course of action. But again, if that's not what the voter chooses to do, they would get a provisional ballot, would capture that vote, and then would work to kind of verify their registration. Now, of course, if the voter ultimately turned out in that scenario to not be registered, there's nothing we can do after Election Day to register them and have that vote count. So there's lots of contingency plans, but the bottom line is, depending on the specific circumstances, the voter will actually get a information card upon receiving a provisional ballot with next steps that apply to their specific situation.
All right, thank you very much. And what if I'm being harassed at the polls or otherwise regarding voting? Where do I report this? I think I know who's going to take this one.
Well, I know that the secretary has, specific guidance to poll workers on this. So if you want to take that, and then I can take it from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly if there's anything at all that you have a question about or feels wrong, either in your lead up to voting or at the polling place itself, we want you to call 866-R-VOTE. That is a well-established national nonpartisan voter protection hotline run by civil rights and election law attorneys. Prior to being Secretary of State, often oversaw that management of that hotline as an election lawyer. So I feel very confident in its efficacy, and we're working in partnership with those staffing that hotline with the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights to ensure that when a call is made, we hear about it. We can oftentimes fix things right as soon as we hear about it, but then at the same time, it enables us to respond to anything as it's happening. So call 866-R-VOTE, and then also document what you're seeing if you're seeing something that seems wrong in the precinct, whether it's voter intimidation, harassment, or something that is otherwise off. Call the hotline, but also make sure that you're collecting information. And at this point, the AGs, I'm sure, got much more specific guidance on that front.
Yeah, and you can also call, especially if it's outside of the polling location, certainly you should call local law enforcement, or you can call us at the Department of Attorney General. And we're going to have a number of attorneys who are staffed and ready to go immediately. Plus, we'll have contacts with wherever you are in the state, literally any corner of the state. If you find this to be an issue, we will have someone on it immediately. And it could be your, municipal police department, it could be your county sheriff, it could be the state police, but someone will be there to ensure your safety. And so the last thing that we want to see is if you go to the polls, you see something that concerns you, please don't just turn around and say, well, you know what, I'm not going to vote. Because then those who are trying to deter you from exercising your right have won. That's what those people want in the event that they are engaging in that activity. So, make that phone call, let us know. we will get somebody on it right away. And just all I would say is, stick around or plan to come back very soon thereafter, because we are going to take care of any potential situation where people are feeling intimidated, harassed, threatened immediately. So just let us know, and we'll be on it right away. But don't let anyone deter you from voting. And as the secretary often says, you have to be persistent. This is your right to vote, and you shouldn't relinquish it easily, or without. When I say without a fight, I don't mean a physical fight. I mean with doing everything in your power to ensure that you get in there and you vote. And let the secretary and I do our jobs and make sure if there are any issues at all that we take care of them right away.
Yeah, and just to underscore that, our job is to protect you, to protect voters, to protect citizens in casting their fundamental right to vote and exercising their fundamental right to vote. So know also that we are unequivocally on your side. You gather the details, you gather the information, help us seek justice on your behalf if that's what the situation calls for. But know that my team and the Attorney General's team will be in the field on Election Day. In many cases, I will have a team member no more than at any point 5 or 10 minutes from many of our most populous election voting sites. And so by calling that hotline, that enables us to hear about it so that we can even send someone there right away to assist with the matter. And I know, again, we're working in very close partnership and tandem with the AG and her staff as well. So we're ready to go. We have your back, and we're our job and up until the moment those polls close and even beyond is to protect you and your vote and your voice.
Okay. Secretary Benson, on Friday, October 16th this year, you issued a directive to local election clerks statewide clarifying that the open carry of firearms on Election Day in polling places, clerk's offices, and absent voter counting boards is prohibited on Election Day. Again, that's November 3rd, 2020. What should voters do if they encounter this prohibited activity?
Well, importantly, we want voters to know, again, this directive, as well as other directives coming from my office, in light of my role as the chief election officer, that include the fact that you can't take photos of other voters and their ballots at the polls. You can't campaign for candidates inside polling places. Polling places are sacred areas, and the fundamental right to vote needs to be a priority, needs to be protected in that sacred space, particularly in a moment like we are now here in Michigan, when there's so much uncertainty on so many levels, but certainly a significant number of threats and other types of issues being made against lawmakers, against leaders, and creating a very uncertain environment, and an environment where many voters and clerks approached myself and the Attorney General and said, how can we ensure everyone is safe on Election Day? So this guidance and this directive, based on, again, my authority and the recognition that the open carry of firearms can be intimidating, can be, especially in an environment like this, seen as a threat, seen as harassment, even just the visual of it. We are very clearly, with the law on our side, working to provide clarity and certainty to everyone, including our clerks and voters and election workers, that there's simply a ban on the open carry of firearms in precincts and polling places and in voting areas, so that we can ensure the safety of those who do vote at polling places. We want to be clear, this is not in response to a specific threat. We don't expect disturbances on Election Day. By and large, our expectation is that Election Day will go smoothly, that millions of Michigan citizens will be voting without incident. But it's also a reflection of the fact that we're on it. We're going to protect every voter. We're going to use every tool at our disposal to do so. And I'm grateful for the partnership with the Attorney General and the Michigan State Police and so many local law enforcement who are similarly aligned with our goal to protect every voter and every voter's ballot.
All right, thank you. Attorney General Nessel, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, just that, as we always say, voting again should be an island of calm where you have nothing else to think about except for who you're voting for. And I can say, after many, many years of going to the polls and casting my ballot, fortunately, I've never seen a gun in a polling place. And I don't know how I would react if I did. I think I would be scared. honestly. I think I would feel very, very uncomfortable seeing the open display of weapons. And so the last thing we want is for people to even have to have a thought in their head about that. Now, for people who have, concealed pistol licenses, and who have been, of course, cleared to carry those, if you're going to a location where it's not otherwise prohibited, then you retain your right to do that. And of course, that's not in places like churches or schools or stadiums. If that's the type of place that you vote, that's where your precinct is located. But if you are a person who likes to open carry, and you generally do so legally, you can leave your gun in your car, and then go in and vote, and then come right back out, and then proceed to open carry just as you always would. It is this brief period of time where people can go into the polls and not have to be evaluating their voting choices at the same time as they're side-eyeing somebody who's got a firearm. And so we feel as though that's very important. I stand by the secretary and her decision on this, and her authority in order to promulgate this guidance. And our goal is just make sure that everybody has the most pleasant and joyful experience possible while they're voting.
All right, this has been extremely informative. Thank you both for your time today, and thank you both for your leadership on this issue and your partnership. So with that, I will turn it over to Kim Woolridge.
Thank you. Thank you to Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Attorney General Dana Nessel for participating in this Q&A session. Thank you to Executive Director James E. White of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights for leading the Q&A session. Thank you to the interpreter, Bethany James, for providing interpreting services. Thank you to DPAN for providing the closed captioning and the editing. And thank you to the staff of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, the Michigan Department of State, and the Michigan Department of the Attorney General, who helped put this virtual Q&A session together. Some very important information was shared during the session. The Secretary of State election protection number 866 our vote 866-687-8683 was one of the resources. If you would like additional information about voting in Michigan, go to www.michigan.gov/vote. Michigan voters who believe they are experiencing voter intimidation or are witnessing it should contact the AG's office by calling 517-335-7659. And if you believe that you've been discriminated against with regards to your right to vote, you may contact the Michigan Department of Civil Rights at www.michigan.gov/MDCR. Thank you, stay safe, and most of all, vote.
Vote. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks.